Good afternoon, everyone. Guys, we're going to be talking today about Ukraine, about the World War III escalations. We're going to be talking about why Storm Shadow missile is so important. We're going to talk about what it is and how it differs from other weapons on the battlefield. We're also going to give you I'm also going to give you a little bit of a background to Ukraine, because I know a lot of people are talking about this war starting in 2022. But the reality is this started, you could argue, in 2013. Certainly, there was troop movements in 2014. We're then going to talk about what the recent escalations are and the way I see this thing moving forward. Guys, remember, a lot of this is my own speculation, my own analysis, and my own opinions. Where I'm quoting things from mainstream media, I will always put them in the links below, guys, because I'm getting so many videos taken down at the moment for fake misinformation, fake news. But the reality is I will say something, and then, because it's not out in the mainstream, it gets classed as fake news or, whatever. What I will always say is, guys, don't take my word for it. Look at the links I put in the description. Do your own research, and of course, make your own opinions and make your own mind up if you're going to do anything that affects your life. So, guys, let's start at the beginning, because a lot of people are saying that, the recent invasion started in 2022. We need to cast our minds back to 2013 and why this whole thing started in the first place. So, the Ukraine in 2013 was under they had a president called Viktor Yanukovych, who was a Russian lapdog. Now, the Ukrainians at that time had passed a bill giving them more economic ties to the European Union. Now, this was something that the younger people in Ukraine, they really wanted, because you've got to understand the the social situation in Ukraine at that time. You had a lot of young people. By young, I mean between under 30s. And these people wanted a better life. I mean, who doesn't want a better life for themselves? They were looking to the west, in the context of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and looking at post-Soviet states and thinking, we want to be like that. They've got better jobs, they've got a better quality of life. And, there's more, there's more life for them there, where they're looking at and then they're looking to the east, and they're looking at, what's happening in Russia, and they're looking at mass amounts of corruption. They're looking at mass government, intervention in every facet of life. And they genuinely didn't want that. So there was a bill due to be passed that would grant the Ukrainians more European economic ties. Now, this was all passed through the Ukrainian parliament. At the last minute, the president, Viktor Yanukovych, he didn't sign it. He signed another bill that pushed them closer towards Russia. Now, that's what started the Maidan revolution, guys, all right? And that's when this whole thing started. Now, when people say, oh, Ukraine had secret CIA bases, if they had, guys, and I don't know if there's any legitimacy to these claims or not, but what I will say is there may have been bases and projects funded by America. Now, if that happened after 2014, after the revolution, this was at request of the government, after the Russians have already invaded, because the Russians already annexed Crimea in 2014. So when people are saying, oh, the Russians were provoked because the secret CIA bases, just ask them when those secret CIA bases were operating. And if they were operating after the Russian invasion, it's a non-argument to say that the Russians were provoked to invade Ukraine after they'd already invaded Ukraine. It makes no sense, guys, right? So that, we need to go back and look at the original, why this whole thing started. Moving forward, 2022, there was a huge buildup of troops on the border. February 2022, what we now call as the main invasion went into Ukraine. It was an absolute disaster for Vladimir Putin. The two things that saved the Ukrainians and this is my opinion, guys, the two main things that saved the Ukrainians initially were the NLAW, which was a handheld rocket anti-tank weapon, and the Starlink system, which gave the Ukrainians the ability to communicate to each other securely, and that gave a really big battlefield. What's the word? Situational awareness of the battlefield. So that brings us on to today, September 2020. What are we on? 2024. So the British Prime Minister and his entourage have just been to America to speak to Joe Biden about letting the Ukrainians use Storm Shadow long-range missile systems. They're talking about the ATACMS as well, the Army Tactical Missile System. The ATACMS, guys, it's a lesser system. It's not as potent. The main system here is the Storm Shadow, or the Scalp, which is what it's called in the French. Sorry, the French have the same system, but it's just called the Scalp. So the Storm Shadow missile, then, this was developed in '94, I think, and it comes from most weapon systems, they're developed from something else. So this was developed from, I think, a French missile that was an anti-runway missile. It was basically developed to go in and destroy runways. Anyway, the Storm Shadow missile, the reason the Ukrainians want it and the reason it's so potent is because it's unstoppable. And what do I mean by unstoppable? When you're talking about these drones and these long-range drones that the Ukrainians are striking deep into deep inside Russia, they have to be controlled, as I understand it. They have to be controlled by someone, or they're flying off GPS, or they're flying off something. Now, when you have a two-way communications channel on your drone, that two-way communication channel, it can be hacked, it can be seen, it's giving off signature. The Scalp missile system, it's preloaded with a target, and once it's let go, you can't call it back. It doesn't come back. You can't stop it. Now, the way that you would hack or stop or bring down a drone or bring down a missile system, you would mess about with its targeting, because a lot of these systems, you can alter them when they're in flight, and you can make them self-destruct. You can't do that with the Scalp. Once you let that go, it doesn't come back. So if you've got a two-way channel, you can blast a load of signals at that missile system. So you can blast, and I don't know what these waves are. You can blast whatever radio waves it is, whatever radio signals. And at some point, that Scalp system, the missile system, it will take those radio waves on board. It will get confused and it will crash, or it may self-destruct. There's a load of stuff that can happen. With the Scalp missile system, that can't happen. So that's why it's so important that's why it's really important that the Ukrainians want it. Also, guys, with the Scalp, I keep interchanging Scalp and Storm Shadow. It's the same missile. With the Storm Shadow system, I don't know if there's any truth in this, but there's been a lot of reports that a lot of the Russian ships that have been sank have actually been sank already by the Storm Shadow missile. So we know it's potent, we know it works, and we know it's very, it's a really good weapon system. Why do the Ukrainians want that as opposed to their own drone systems? Reliability. It's got a lot of sophisticated equipment on it, and it's got artificial intelligence. It has battle damage analysis. So as this system's coming in, right at the last minute, just before it hits, it will send a load of photos back. So whoever's recording this, whether that's at NATO headquarters, whether that's at the Kiev headquarters, they'll be able to see what actual damage is being done. So it's a really potent weapon system. And that's why Vladimir Putin is scared of this system, because he knows there really isn't any way that this can be stopped. This goes hand in hand, though, with the Russian glide munitions. There really isn't any way of stopping those either. So we're seeing this, new battlefield open up, which is basically air-launched cruise missiles now. That you can't call them back, guys, and neither side have an answer for them, because there really isn't an answer for them. Once you let these things go, you can't call them back. They're going to hit their target. And I think the only way realistically to take them down is to shoot them out of the sky. So that's kind of what's been happening. That's the prelude to Ukraine. That's why the people are talking about the Storm Shadow missile, why it's so important, and why the Ukrainians need it. What's been happening most recently? Well, this meeting that happened with guys, and it's all pomp and circus at the moment, but the meeting that was happening with Biden and Keir Starmer, the decision's already been made to let the Ukrainians use a Storm Shadow missile. It will be made at the right time. Now, there's a lot of things that can be happening in the battlefield at the moment. There's the push towards Pokrovsk. There's the nuclear power plant in the Kursk region. There's there's the Canadians that are just saying now that they support the Ukrainians having the long-range missile systems. So you can see this coalition now putting pressure on Biden. And again, guys, to me, this all seems like pomp and circus. The decision's already been made. I've heard from my circles that the decision's already been made. I think everybody who's watching the mainstream know that the decision's been made. Everybody's saying it. It seems like the United States are the only ones putting the brakes on this at the moment. What I will say is there's more and more rhetoric now coming out of Russia about using nuclear missiles. What I think the next stage of this would be for the Russians to start testing nuclear weapons, because that nuclear weapons are not like, it's not like some ammunition you've got in your cupboard saved and you can just pull it out and put it in your whatever. These things have to be, they have to be highly tuned, they have to be prepped, they have to, they have to be detonated in a correct sequence, so it's not just like you can put one in an aircraft and fire it away. If you think about the height of if you think about the Cold War, the Americans and the Russians were testing all the time. They were testing these missiles all the time, testing bigger bombs, testing bigger delivery systems, testing more potent, yields. So that was the height of the Cold War. So until we see that happening, I don't see any credibility of nuclear weapons being fired just yet. But what I will say, and this is just my contemplation, I think there's a theory in military doctrine. It's called escalate to de-escalate. So if you think about when the nuclear weapons were dropped in Japan, you can argue, and there's a strong argument for it, that they actually saved more lives, and I mean Japanese lives as well, than they actually took, by the sense that, right, okay, the Americans fired one bomb. They said, right, are you going to surrender? They said, no. They said, okay, we'll fire another. They said, right, are you going to surrender? We can keep doing this all day. And the Japanese said, yeah, okay, we're going to surrender. That, there's a strong argument that because the Americans didn't have to do a ground invasion, they didn't have to have, another D-Day landing, that saved a lot more lives. So I think with that doctrine and with that military thought patterning process, I'm trying to think now, are we looking at an even more catastrophic war with a conventional war? Because none of these sides seem to be able to back down at the moment. None of these sides seem to be able to come to a peace agreement. And again, why should Zelensky come to a peace agreement when Russia's still in his land? Why should they all? Russia is not going to back out of those lands. If Russia backs out of those lands, it's the end of Russia. Russia will become balkanized, and Putin knows this. So everybody's in a situation now where nobody can back down. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. This was a bit of a duller video today because, I'm conscious that I wanted to get some facts out there and get you guys some, just some context, because a lot of people think this conflict started in 2022. Guys, it started in 2013 or, the troops on the ground 2014. So that's the reality of the situation from Ukraine. This is going to escalate further and further, guys, all right? There is no backing down from any side now, guys. Anyway, I'm going to back to grid, guys. I'll get you another video later.